first question. One of the toughest things I think about this topic is, we talked about how broad it is, but there's so much nuance in the actual situations that can occur. So I think it's important for us to spend a little bit of time on the ways that this can manifest and the different types of situations that can crop up. Karin, could you provide us an example, or could you each provide us an example of a situation and what we could learn from it? And I think that would be a good starting spot for us today.
Yeah, so thanks for having me. I'm excited to be here. Can you hear me okay? Yeah, so rather than speak about a personal experience, I'd like to come at this question more from a professional perspective. So I've been representing employers in employment litigation like sexual harassment lawsuits for over a decade, and what I've learned through that experience is that it's actually very difficult to establish legally actionable sexual harassment in court. And I know we'll have an opportunity to talk more about that as we progress through this discussion today. But I think it's important for us to keep in mind that when we use the phrase sexual harassment, that has a legal meaning, and then that has kind of the meaning that most, in the way that most of us are use that phrase. So in order to be legally actionable, harassment needs to be severe or pervasive, and it needs to be both subjectively and objectively offensive. And the courts, I can give maybe just one example to illustrate that will make this point a little bit more clearly. There's a Seventh Circuit case where the fact pattern was as follows. There was a supervisor who had allegedly made inappropriate comments, including that the plaintiff in that case was, quote, made for the backseat of a car, looked like a, quote, UPS driver, and looked like a, quote, dyke. He also allegedly said that he hated pushy and aggressive women, such as the plaintiff. But the court in that case decided that that alleged conduct did not rise to the level of legally actionable sexually harassment, and that lawsuit was dismissed. And I'm not making any commentary on whether I think that's right or wrong, but that's the state of the law. So it's a very difficult thing to establish.
Kirsten?
The personal example I wanted to give today has to do with me being a victim and now choosing to be an advocate. And as I thought through an example I would share today, what I felt might be most important for employers in this day and age is to think very carefully, do a lot of strategic development and self-examination of your own organization, because in my situation, when I knew I was being harassed and retaliated against by my employer, I did my due diligence. I dug out my handbook, my physical handbook, and when I went through it, every other page was missing. So I checked around, and all my coworkers, every other page was missing in their physical handbook. This was before it was online. So think carefully, re-examine what your policies are, be prepared, make sure that your employees know where the policy handbook is, what it says, and how to help other people get to it as well. In this day and age, it's all online anyway, but it's also important to update those policies too and have those at the ready. So that's my example for today.
Jon?
So my example would be a category of problems that we see primarily in work environments. So just a question for all of you. How many of you in your work environments have social functions, sales conferences, etc.? Just raise your hand up. Right? So pretty much everyone's hands are raised. One of the things that is a big issue for business is the behaviors that happen at those events, particularly when there's alcohol involved. And to me, that's a giant issue for companies. It's a giant liability for companies. And the answer to reducing the instances of really stupid behavior at those things, that's a technical HR term, is to set expectations with folks for behavior. You want to enable people to have a good time. You want people to act like adults. Inevitably, some folks won't act like adults. And so it's really important for leadership to set expectations for behavior at those things, at those events. And then when there are issues, when issues actually happen, it's really important to hold those employees whose behavior is totally inappropriate to complete account, without regard to their performance, their contribution to the company, et cetera. Maybe we'll talk a little bit about that later, about the issue of when you have a high-performing employee who is a bad actor in a company, and the company's hesitance to act on that person because they don't want to lose the sales or the revenue, despite the fact that the person should be gone.
Tiffany?
Okay, so examples? Examples. Okay. Anyway, okay. Well, we all have, I know a lot of women in this room, and we all have all kinds of stories we could share. At Iowa Women Lead Change this year, we really focused on working together with our male allies, and I just want to, what my hope is after today is that we will leave here with the confidence and the courage to know that it's okay, whether we're a woman or a man, to step forward when we see something that's not right. And I'll just share with you, I like to share the good examples, which was pretty courageous. I was in the news business for a very long time, / entertainment. So you can imagine it's one of those careers a lot of people want to get into, kind of hard to get in. So once you're in, you want to really protect your spot. You don't want to be a troublemaker. This was a long time ago, before Me Too certainly was ever even thought of. But there was a video of me as an individual in high heels walking, and this was back when, this will really date me, but we had an off-air monitor in the newsroom that we could see. It wasn't aired publicly, but one of the video editors was watching that video forward and back, over and over again, watching me walk. Kind of creepy, truthfully. Well, the news director, a gentleman, and this would have been the mid-90s, which gives you an idea. This was a good human. And that's the other lesson, just be a good human, it's just that easy. But he happened to see that and went into the room where this video was coming from and took this kid and slammed him against a wall. And as a young woman, you know, we just sort of navigate, none of us want to be victims, so we just sort of navigate this terrain all the time. We don't even know when we're doing it anymore, but it made me feel so, you know, empowered, proud, that this boss, I mean, I didn't know him, we weren't friends personally, but my boss saw that this was inappropriate and stepped forward to do something about it. You know, fast forward to just, you know, maybe 3 or 4 years ago at an event, news director who ended up getting, no one ever fires him, even though he was suspended and no one knew why, which is another legal question we can discuss. But we were at a social event, and my husband happened to be there, and this manager of mine came and sat almost on my lap. And when we got home, my husband came over, I was sitting on the bed, and he came over and he sat almost on my lap. And he looked at me and he said, "That is not okay." And I think for me, again, that was obviously my biggest male ally and my husband, but it really speaks to how really strong individuals can be victims of this. And we all need to be self-aware, you know, men and women, and step forward and be courageous enough to call it out when we see it. And that, you know, my hope today, if we can leave here today all feeling that much more empowered to do that, I'd be thrilled.